Hi, everybody. Mitch Tannenbaum here. Thanks for joining me today. Today, I'm going to talk about the CMMC paperwork process, not the actual part of the assessment, because I think there's some confusion around that. First thing you got to do is your level 1 self-assessment. And level 1 self-assessment is pretty simple. It's 15 controls or 17 assessment objectives. It's pass-fail, but you have to record that inside of SPURs separately because the scope of level 1 might be different than the scope of level 2. For example, your accounting people might have federal contract information, but they might not have controlled and classified information. So as a result, you got to do that separately. Once you've done that, then you've got to do your 800-171 attestation. Now, 800-171 attestation is, again, as a self-assessment. All you need to do is put in there what your score is. Your score can be anything from negative 200 to plus 110. There's no constraints on that. But then you have to attest to that, and you have to do that every year. This is separate from anything you're doing on CMMC because this is for existing contracts, not for new contracts. Okay. Then, assuming your contract allows for a self-assessment, you have to do your CMMC level 2 self-assessment. And you're doing this obviously in whatever system you're doing it, but then inside of SPRS is actually asking you what the answer is to each of the 110 questions. And then based on your answers, it may say, nope, can't self-assess or can't self-attest. You have to do that every year. And this is different than a third-party certification. So once you've answered the questions, then you actually have to do an attestation, which is the part where they can haul you into court if you lie about it. This is separate from the actual assessment. This is an attestation. Then if your customer requires it or contract requires it, you may have to do a level 2 C3 PAO process and get a certification. That is required every 3 years. And, you're not required to do a self-assessment and a C3 PAO assessment. And, depending on what your contract says, you probably only have to do one. And if you do a C3 PAO one, then you don't have to do the self-assessment. But then, even after you've done that, you have to do your level 2 C3 PAO attestation. This is separate. The C3 PAO will enter your score in EMAS, which will ultimately make its way into SPURs. There's a tab for C3 PAO certifications in SPURs now. But the attestation is a separate process, and you got to do that separately. So as you can see, this process is pretty convoluted. The paperwork is pretty convoluted. And if you don't do it right, they can come after you because you didn't do the damn paperwork right. So if you have questions about this, and many of you will, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer that. And obviously, we would love to assist you with any of your 800-171 or CMMC work. Thanks for listening.